Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 271 Colonizing Cuba and Panama. Looking at the cotton seeds, sisal seeds and cocoa seeds left by Diego Columbus, Marin fell into deep thought. Originally, Diego Columbus, the adjutant, should not have come to report this to Marin, but the chief officer had been Columbus's assistant for many years. He regarded Columbus as his master, and naturally regarded Diego as his little master. Therefore, after arriving at the mainland, the chief officer pretended to be sick and asked Diego to come to report on his work and accept the reward. Of course, the chief officer's credit cannot be escaped. It's just that the limelight was given to Diego. Marin suddenly felt that it was time to develop Cuba and Panama. Needless to say, Cuba is a major sugar production island in later generations, a world-famous sugar production area, and a rum and cigar production area. Grenada Island is still too small after all, with a total of only 344 square kilometers. Moreover, the island is full of undulating mountains, and there are not many real plains. If it weren't for the safe environment without poisonous insects, Marin would not have chosen this place as a colony. Cuba is different. It covers an area of 100,000 square kilometers, and most of it is plains. It is the most suitable area for agriculture in the Caribbean. Moreover, there are huge reserves of nickel ore in the mountainous area along the southwest coast of Cuba. If he had nickel ore, Marin could not only make white copper and forge fake silver coins. Moreover, it can also be used to make stainless steel, replacing tinplate and becoming the best shell for wrapping the hull. Marin did not know the specific distribution of Cuban nickel ore, but he knew that there was a city called Moa on the north coast of the southwest of Cuba. There are obviously large nickel mines near the city. Because the two largest nickel smelters in Cuba are located in Moa. Marin, as the emperor of history and geography, still remembers the general location of Moa, which is a little west of a short and thick peninsula in the northeast. Its latitude is probably a little south of the southernmost tip of Great Inagua Island. As long as we find the location of Moa, it will be easy to do next. You said to find nickel ore. That's too easy. Because the nickel ore in Cuba is laterite nickel ore. As long as we find laterite, we can try to smelt it in the furnace. As for the problem of impurity, it is not a problem. Wait until nickel is found, and then finally select the ore. So, as long as Moa is found, and then the red soil is looked for everywhere, the nickel ore will be easily found. In fact, Marin vaguely remembers that in the satellite map he had seen in his previous life, there was a large red area to the east of Moa City, near a large lake facing the sea. The red area, associated with laterite nickel ore, Marin felt that the nickel ore was probably there. In fact, Marin was right. There was the largest nickel mining site near Moa. As long as he found it, he would find a huge nickel mine. For this reason, Marin planned to open up two colonies in Cuba, this time Havana and Moa. Needless to say, Moa is a nickel mine, which is also a treasure in the future. As long as nickel is obtained, Marin can already imagine the scene of fake silver coins made of white copper flooding Europe. Unlike lead-tin alloy, the physical and chemical properties of white copper are very stable. For example, the melting point of lead-tin alloy solder is too low, only 183 degrees. Just get a red-hot iron block and put the lead-tin alloy counterfeit coins against it, and it will melt into liquid immediately. Or, get some acid and throw the lead-tin alloy in, and it will also dissolve easily. But white copper is different, and the physical and chemical characteristics of white copper are stable. Whether it is a red-hot iron block or acid, it cannot be distinguished. Besides, in this era, people in the world don't know about nickel. As long as no one under his men leaks the secret, Europeans will not know the existence of nickel. What's more, Europeans have already mixed a lot of copper into silver coins, and they are almost turning into copper coins. This also makes the alloy of nickel and copper more difficult to identify. Thinking of the scene where he made a fake silver coin made of white copper, and no one could identify it even if it was circulated, Marin smiled obscenely. He can already imagine the beautiful scene of using white copper coins to impersonate silver coins in the future and by all of Europe. Cuban laterite nickel ore has millions of tons of reserves. Marin does not need to defeat 10,000 tons, as long as 10,000 tons, he can make white copper coins impact all of Europe and squeeze the real silver coin market. In addition to mining and smelting nickel ore, the Moa region can actually engage in some agriculture nearby. Although there are more mountains and fewer plains, it is still larger than the area of Grenada Island. Just find a vacant land near the river and you can reclaim a lot of fields. Don't need more, as long as you are self-sufficient. As for Havana, it is located in the western plains and is most suitable for agricultural development. Here, Marin can grow sugar cane, rice, cotton, sisal, cocoa, and large areas of spices and rubber trees. Well, it seems that everything can be grown on the plains on the island of Cuba. Of course, sugar and cotton are the mainstream trade commodities in the 18th and 19th centuries. Therefore, sugar cane and cotton should become important crops. At the same time, sisal is also very important. After all, great voyages are very necessary. In addition to making cables and canvas, it is also important to make fishing nets and rainproof cloth. The last time I went to Cuba, Columbus had already found Havana Bay. Moreover, coincidentally, there is a vacuum area of Taino power, located between two Taino tribes. Therefore, Marin's men can build cities and cultivate land here with peace of mind. As long as they gain a foothold, the local Taino people will not be a concern. As for Panama, the situation is a little more complicated. Because the climate and environment in Panama are very bad. Not only is it hot, but it is also humid and rainy. That's not all. There are many poisonous insects and mosquitoes there. Outsiders who go there are easily bitten by poisonous insects and mosquitoes, and then die of diseases such as yellow fever. Therefore, in order to conquer Panama, Marin prepared for a long time and prepared a killer weapon, mosquito-repellent floral water. Mosquito-repellent floral water is made by using the dried petals of pyrethrum picked in autumn, soaking them in high-concentration alcohol, and then adding some essences to make a low-concentration perfume, floral water. Because the petals of pyrethrum with strong insecticidal ability are soaked inside, it has strong insecticidal ability. Mosquitoes, let alone biting people, will cause nerve paralysis and signs of poisoning as soon as they touch the skin that has been smeared with mosquito-repellent floral water and smell the smell of pyrethrum, actually pyrethrin. 2 more breaths of fairy air can lead to death. Pyrethrin is a strong poison for both mosquitoes and other insects. However, for large mammals such as humans, this toxicity is minimal. Probably, only infants will be affected a little. As for adults, there is no effect at all. Moreover, Marin would not send babies to a poor and remote place like Panama. When pyrethrum was harvested last fall, Marin sent people to purchase a lot of dried pyrethrum flowers for making mosquito-repellent floral water. Now, it comes in handy when we are going to conquer Panama. Marin's instructions to the colonization team going to Panama were, after arriving at Colón, Panama, the first planned colony, Marin was too lazy to change the name. Havana, Moa and Colón all use the original name. Don't rush to advance inland, but first establish a colony, and then plant all the pyrethrum and wormwood seeds brought. As long as the pyrethrum and wormwood grow, they will form an isolation zone, so that local mosquitoes dare not approach the colony. Then, the next task of the colonization team is to keep cutting down trees towards the Pacific Ocean. The ultimate goal is to cut out a road. Moreover, on both sides of the road, pyrethrum and wormwood will be planted again, making this road a mosquito-free zone. Once the road is opened, Marin will consider transporting cement from the mainland and making a cement road to facilitate communication between the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean. Then, Panama City can be built on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. With Panama City, Marin could build several clippers and place them in Panama City. Then, he could set out from Panama City and cross the Pacific Ocean to find the route to Ming Dynasty, and finally complete the communication and trade with Ming Dynasty. Chapter 272, Princess Anne's Birthday. On June 15, when Marin rushed back to Emden to prepare to send a fleet to Cuba and Panama, old Hoffman and Lady Mary suddenly called Marin back to Auric. The reason was that Anne's 18th birthday was coming, on June 18. The 18th birthday is a very special day, and for a girl, it means adulthood. However, in Europe at this time, many noble ladies got married before the age of 18. For example, the Queen of France, Anne of Brittany, was arranged to marry the agent of Maximilian I at the age of 15. It is also common for princesses to get married at the age of 16 or 17. Anne turned 18 after her 18th birthday, and she was indeed at the age of marriage. As for Simon and Albert, I don't know why, the age of marriage for European noblemen is generally older. Many nobles get married in their 30s, and it is also normal to get married in their 20s. Moreover, there is no tradition in Europe that the younger children must get married before the older children get married. Although Anne is the youngest, because she is a girl, Simon and Albert will marry her first. But the question now is, who will Anne marry? You know, Anne is Marin's only sister and a very favored princess. Unlike Simon and Albert. Although Simon and Albert are princes, they have no inheritance rights because of Caesar's birth. Therefore, when choosing a marriage partner, they are often passive and may be low-matched. After all, they have no inheritance rights and cannot reach the level of princes. Therefore, except for good luck, it is difficult to marry a princess. Even if you can marry a princess, it is the kind of princess that is difficult to marry. For example, she is ugly, has defects, or is a princess of a weak prince's family. However, and is different. Ordinary princesses will be high-matched. Because, according to convention, the heir of the prince will definitely marry a princess, otherwise the whole family will be embarrassed. Just like Marin, who married Angela, the knight's daughter, actually the daughter of the Pope, was despised by many nobles. Because there are several levels between princes and knights. Marin marrying a knight's daughter definitely lowered the family's grade. Of course, the Hoffman family was originally a nouveau riche in the aristocratic world, and was looked down upon by many traditional old nobles. Although, due to Marin's great military power, no one dared to despise Marin in person. However, behind the scenes, there are still many old nobles who discriminate against Marin's birth. After all, although Marin is the blood of the Bullock family, Marin's mother, Lady Mary, married a little knight of old Hoffman, which is low-matching. Therefore, as the son of a knight, Marin is also low-matching in the eyes of those old nobles. Even many people think that Marin's marriage to Angela, the knight's daughter, is a perfect match. Marin rushed back to Auric and specially asked Angela to hold a grand birthday party and birthday ball for Anne in the palace, and solemnly introduced Princess Anne to everyone. In addition to the nobles of East Frisia, according to the request of her mother-in-law, Lady Mary, Angela also invited many envoys stationed in Auric by the principalities to attend the ball. The reason for this is that Lady Mary wants to use this platform to recommend Anne to various countries. After all, after seeing Anne's beauty, those envoys from various countries are likely to recommend Anne to their own princes. In this way, Anne can marry a foreign prince. Old Hoffman and Lady Mary are very ambitious. They believe that as the only sister of a powerful prince, and with such beauty and education, she should not marry a noble of low rank in the country, but a prince. If it is the crown prince with the right of inheritance, it would be even better. Therefore, they asked Marin to arrange a grand birthday party and court ball to show the beautiful East Frisian princess and to envoys from various countries. In order to make Anne's appearance more stunning, old Hoffman even asked Marin to act as a designer and design a beautiful evening dress and shape for Anne. After all, the clothes designed by Marin for Angela look very good. So, the miserable Marin fought with the tailors all night, and finally made a set of fitting silk princess dress for Anne according to Marin's memory. This princess dress is pink, showing a little shoulder, but the skirt is dragged on the ground. After all, women's clothing in this era is not suitable for showing thighs, which is too frivolous. Even if the shoulders are exposed, they are only exposed a little, and they dare not show it randomly. After all, people are still relatively conservative during this period because of the pressure of Catholicism. The style of the whole dress was made a little bit out of place by Marin. It looks like a hybrid version of the Republic of China cheongsam and princess dress. However, this style is very figure-flattering. When Anne appeared at the banquet wearing a pink princess dress and a wreath on her head, it caused a huge sensation. I have heard of Princess Anne's beauty for a long time, but because of Marin, it is not very popular to hold balls and banquets in the East Frisian aristocracy. Therefore, Anne rarely appears in public, but it is rumored that she is as beautiful as a flower. The young talents of East Frisia drool when they see the beautiful Anne. In addition to beautiful clothes, Anne herself is also very beautiful. Because she inherited the beauty of Lady Mary, and is a younger version of Lady Mary. Exquisite face, shy expression, beautiful clothes and rose perfume sprayed on the body. Whether visually or visually, it is beautiful and unparalleled. Among all the people present, I am afraid that only Angela can compete with Anne. However, today's banquet and dance are hosted by the guard Anne. Therefore, in order not to steal the limelight from her sister-in-law Anne, Angela specially changed into old-fashioned clothes, which looked less bright. Not only the young talents of East Frisia present were amazed, but also those foreign envoys. As veteran politicians, they knew very well what the purpose of this banquet was. Originally, they had never met Anne and didn't think anything of it. After all, the Hoffman family is not an old and glorious family. But today, after seeing Princess Anne herself, they suddenly felt that, even if her background was not so prominent. But based on her appearance alone, Princess Anne was already far better than most princesses. Of course, Marin felt that the descriptions of the envoys were not enough, so he called Leonardo da Vinci over. Ada, help and draw a few oil paintings, and be quick. What for? I'm still busy studying the steam engine. Leonardo da Vinci was a little unhappy. Watizing the Newcomen steam engine is his main job at the moment. Moreover, it is a critical moment. Put it aside for now. Now, the biggest task of East Frisia is to find a suitable husband for Princess N. You mean, let me draw her more beautifully and then attract those princes? Nonsense, N is already so beautiful, does she need to be drawn more beautifully? You just need to draw the real situation. Leonardo da Vinci looked at N dancing on the dance floor and nodded, that's right, Princess N is indeed very beautiful. Just like that, Leonardo da Vinci drew an oil painting of N on the spot. Then, Marin asked him to repeat the painting for more than a dozen times. So, Leonardo spent 3 days. 3 days later, more than a dozen paintings of N were sent to envoys from various countries. Marin specifically asked Geoffrey to ask them to bring Princess N's paintings back to their own monarchs and princes, so as to attract those princes. What Marin and Leonardo da Vinci did not expect was that these dozen oil paintings were later preserved and became Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece, Princess N. Chapter 273 Albert is going to America. N's birthday party was very successful. After the party, N became the dream lover of many young talents in East Frisia. Then, the mansion in the east of the city where N lived became a haunt of many bees and butterflies. However, those are things that only those who have no vision would do. In East Frisia, many smart nobles forbade their children to approach N. Why? Because those smart nobles have guessed the intention of the Hoffman family, that is, N is going to marry a foreign prince. After all, many foreign envoys were invited to N's birthday party. Moreover, Marin asked Leonardo da Vinci to paint more than a dozen oil paintings of Princess N afterwards, and entrusted those foreign envoys to hand them over to their respective masters. Obviously, Princess N is impossible to marry those small nobles in the country. Therefore, smart nobles forbade their children and grandchildren to approach N. Because it is meaningless. Only those not-so-smart nobles acquiesced to their children and grandchildren to pursue N and dream of becoming Marin's brother-in-law. Sure enough, in order to prevent N from being harassed by these mad bees and butterflies in the country, Marin stationed a group of muscular men to guard the gate of the East City mansion. As long as they saw a young man with a coquettish face trying to enter the mansion, these muscular men would take out weapons similar to baseball bats and beat those coquettish young people very measurably, but they would not suffer any serious injuries. After N's birthday, Marin continued to be busy with the dispatch of colonial fleets to Cuba and Panama. In fact, immigrants to Cuba and Panama are easy to find, just pick some immigrants. If it doesn't work, you can go to the southern region to recruit young people who are so poor that they can't eat. In addition, Morigen and Battelle will also send a few disciples to accompany them as doctors at the colony. And Bishop Taylor will also send his own fooling disciples to help fool those immigrants all day and appease the people. These are all small matters. The biggest problem is the selection of the governor of each colony. This time, a total of 3 colonies will be opened: Havana in Cuba, Moa in Cuba, and Colón in Panama. Among them, the most difficult one is actually the governor of Colón, Panama. Why? Because the colonists of this colony are in danger of life due to the harsh local environment. After all, no one can guarantee that they will not be bitten by mosquitoes. Even with mosquito-repellent floral water, there is no safe living environment before pyrethrum and wormwood grow up. Once bitten by poisonous insects and contracted yellow fever, it is almost certain to die. Therefore, it is difficult for Marin to make up his mind about the position of governor of Panama. Moreover, among the original 5 attendants in his hands, Con has no brains and is not suitable to be the governor. Saul is the leader of the scouts, and Marin can't do without him. As for Tara and Garland, they have been sent out. Looking at the attendance of old Hoffman, old George, the only cultural person, has been sent to Granada as governor. As for the 5 attendants around Adler, Marin dared not use them. Why? Adler's identity is too sensitive. According to the law, Adler is the orthodox heir. Although Adler publicly gave up his inheritance rights. However, Marin was not sure whether Adler had any complaints. Even if he didn't, Marin believed that his sister-in-law Liv must be somewhat unwilling. Therefore, Marin had complicated feelings about Adler. Adler wanted money and benefits, and Marin would never be vague. However, if he wanted power, Marin definitely didn't want to give it. Although Adler is now the garrison commander of the earldom of Oldenburg, it seems glorious. However, the troops under Adler's command are all militia. Marin would never give him the military power of the regular army. Not only Adler, but also Simon and Albert. After all, it has only been 20 years since Richard III killed his nephew Edward V. When he was there, Marin naturally wouldn't worry about these brothers. As a traverser, it would be too shameful if he couldn't deal with them. However, if he unfortunately died earlier than his brothers, if his brothers took power, Caesar would be in danger. Therefore, Marin seemed to take good care of his brothers, but in fact, he was on guard in his heart. Just when Marin was struggling, his younger brother Albert came to him and asked to be the governor of America. Marin was shocked. Albert was only 20 years old and wanted to be the governor. He had great ambitions. For a moment, Marin wanted to send Albert to Panama and let him be bitten to death by poisonous mosquitoes. However, Marin soon woke up Albert was still a child and did not show any covetousness for the throne. Even if he coveted, as the fourth son, it would not be his turn. Unless he died early and Albert was in power, like Richard III. Albert was more like Marin among the brothers, more like a civil servant. Adler and Simon, both of them were muscular men. Even in appearance, Albert, like Marin, tended to look like Lady Mary, with a white face and weak appearance. Adler and Simon, on the other hand, looked very much like old Hoffman, both of them were muscular. In fact, Albert likes reading and politics. Moreover, he regards Marin as his idol and likes to imitate Marin in everything he does. As for Simon, the fool, like Adler, he gets a headache when reading books, but he likes martial arts and fighting. Speaking of which, Albert is indeed suitable for being a governor. But the problem is that Albert is too young and lacks experience. He may not be able to bear being a governor all of a sudden. Moreover, there is a very critical problem. That is, as a prince, Albert is likely to marry a foreign princess in the future. If Albert becomes a governor of the American colonies, he can't be separated from his wife, right? In this way, Albert will take his wife to America. In this way, his wife will discover the secret of America. It is not a wild continent, nor is syphilis rampant. Once this news is leaked, Marin will attract competitors to colonize America. So, Marin hesitated immediately. "Brother Marin, what are you hesitating about?" Albert asked curiously. Because he saw Marin's hesitant expression. Marin decided to lay it all out with him. "It's like this, Albert. You are a prince, and you may marry a foreign princess in the future. The savage continent is not so savage, I think you know that. I am worried that you will marry a foreign princess in the future. Once that princess goes to the savage continent with you and discovers the richness there, if she reveals the news to her father or brother, the consequences will be very serious." Albert thought about it, and it was true. So he said, "However, if I don't let her go to the savage continent with me, she won't know about it. It's useless. As long as that foreign princess marries here, she will be the mistress of your family. If she asks your subordinates about it, will your subordinates dare not tell you? Besides, if she gives birth to a son and becomes your heir, will you hide it from your son? By then, she will also know through your son. Then what should I do?" Albert had no idea. After thinking for a long time, Marin said, "There is only one way." "What is it?" "You marry the daughter of a domestic noble. In this way, you don't have to worry about leaks. Domestic nobles include those from East Frisia, the Earldom of Oldenburg, the Duchy of Schleswig, and Munster. As long as they are not from a family that is the mortal enemy of the Hoffman family, you can marry them, but, in this way, your wife's status will be lower." Albert gritted his teeth and thought for a long time, then said firmly, "I will not marry a foreign princess, I will marry a noble lady from my country." "Very good, but you have no say, you must get your parents' consent. In addition, you are absolutely not allowed to marry the daughter or sister of a general, this is a principle." Marin gave Albert a shot in advance. And this is also an important guarantee to prevent his brothers from getting involved in military power. Chapter 274 Family Meeting. Regarding Albert's matter, the Hoffman family quickly held a family meeting. Except for old Hoffman and Mrs. Mary, Marin's brothers and sisters were all present. Adler had come back to attend Anne's birthday party before, and he also returned to Auric, and he didn't have time to leave. So Adler also attended this family meeting. Even Anne came to participate. After all, Anne is an adult, and it's time for her to get involved in political affairs. As for Angela and Liv, there was no meeting. When Albert explained the reason and frankly gave up marrying a foreign princess, old Hoffman was angry. He yelled at Marin, "Asshole, is there a brother like you? What does Albert's desire to go to the savage continent have to do with whether he marries a foreign princess? It's a big deal, Dad, foreign princesses are in danger of leaking secrets." Marin did not give old Hoffman face this time, but repeated the risk of leaking secrets that he had told Albert before. "Can Simon and Albert not marry foreign princesses?" Old Hoffman was unhappy. Of his 5 children, the eldest and second oldest were knights' daughters, which were not of high status. Therefore, he hoped that his 2 youngest sons would marry princesses, and would marry a foreign prince. How face-saving would it be if he told others about it? Not really. If Albert didn't go to the savage continent, there would be no such restriction. He could marry any princess he wanted. Then, Albert, can we not go to the savage continent? Old Hoffman advised. In his opinion, it didn't matter whether he went to the savage continent or not. But whether he married a princess or not was a big deal. However, Albert was determined. No, father, I still decided to go to the savage continent to be the governor. You can also be the governor in your homeland. Marin controls East Frisia, Oldenburg, Schleswig and Munster. There is a governor position anywhere. Marin, don't you think so? Marin nodded and agreed. Yes, Albert, you don't need to go to the savage continent. You can get a good position in your country. Marin is the boss of several vassal states, and it is easy to arrange a position for Albert. No, I will be the governor. I like the feeling of pioneering. Moreover, it is not that difficult to deal with the Indians. I know Brother Marin's expansion in Germany very well, and his opponents are all strong enemies. If it weren't for Brother Marin's wisdom taught by the great sage, he would not be able to resist it at all. Therefore, I, who likes to explore, am more suitable to go to the savage continent to fight the Indian natives. Marin nodded, and he found that his younger brother was still very smart. He knew that his ability was not enough to fight against others in Germany, so he chose to bully the Indians. This is not bullying the weak and fearing the strong, but rationality. If he obviously does not have enough talent, but goes head-to-head with the powerful people on all sides, he is an idiot. Even Marin himself, if it were not for the rich knowledge in his previous life and his own erudition. With his own talents, it would not be possible to fight with the powerful people of his time. However, he used knowledge beyond his time to crush the ancient natives, which was enough to allow himself to occupy a place in the struggle for hegemony among the princes. Albert is not a time traveler, and his talent is not very high, so naturally he does not have the ability to compete with the heroes of this era. Therefore, his choice to bully the Indians is a smart choice. After thinking for a while, Marin said, since you have made up your mind, let's do this. I will let Terra go to Havana to be the governor. And you will go to Amerigo Island to be the governor. The climate on Amerigo Island is not hot, there are no tropical diseases, and it is safer. But, isn't that too unchallenging? It is said that there is not a single Indian on the two islands. Albert was a little unhappy. He felt that he had lost a bargain. Not really, Albert, these two islands are my springboard to conquer the savage continent. The richness of the savage continent is comparable to that of Europe. These two islands are my bridgehead and logistics base for conquering the savage continent. Therefore, the location there is very important. After a while, I plan to send a troop over to test and see if we can expand to the land. That's great. Albert was very happy. At this time, Simon on the side suddenly interrupted, that. Brother Marin, can I lead the troops to fight the Indians? Marin looked at Simon and said with a smile, yes, the conditions are the same as Albert's. You are not allowed to marry a foreign princess. In addition, you are not allowed to marry the daughter or sister of a domestic general. Suddenly, old Hoffman couldn't help but burst out. He yelled at Marin, Marin, what do you mean? It's fine if you are not allowed to marry a foreign princess, but you are not allowed to marry the daughter or sister of a domestic general. Don't you know that most of the nobles in the country are generals who command troops? Without military merit, how can you become a noble? What old Hoffman said is true. In the East Frisian county, most of the nobles are generals who command troops. For example, Schwartz, such as Kahn, were all knighted because of their military merits. You are talking about East Frisian, but there are old nobles in the Oldenburg county and the Duchy of Schleswig. Then why are they not allowed to marry the daughter or sister of a general who commands troops? Old Hoffman said dissatisfiedly. Because I'm afraid they will become Richard III one day in the future. Marin stood up, looked at old Hoffman, and said seriously word by word. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room became cold, and the air seemed to solidify. Lady Mary, Albert, and all changed their faces. Adler was puzzled at first, but seemed to think of something, and his face changed. Only old Hoffman, a poor student, didn't understand what Richard III was. After Lady Mary whispered to him, old Hoffman jumped up in shock. You, Marin, you actually look at your brother like this? When saying this, old Hoffman was already a little stuttering. He didn't expect that Marin would be so cold. It's not that I want to look at my brother like this, but as an emperor, I must have all dangers, and strangle them in the cradle. Marin said firmly. Emperor. Everyone present was shocked. Yes, Emperor. Don't you think I will become a thing of the past in the future? I have already controlled the 5 principalities of East Frisia, Oldenburg, Schleswig, Munster and Osnabrück. The area of my territory is already equivalent to a small kingdom. Therefore, it is very likely that I will become a king in the future. So, don't be surprised. Moreover, an emperor must be cold and ruthless. Edward IV trusted his brother too much, so his son Edward V was killed. Who said Edward V is dead? It is said that Edward V and his brother Richard, Duke of York, escaped. And argued unconvinced. Escape? If they really escaped, would it be Henry VII's turn to be king? Let me tell you, Edward V and the Duke of York were both killed by Richard III in the Tower of London. Their bodies were built into the walls of the Tower of London, and no one found them. Marin said grimly. Everyone shuddered, and old Hoffman said strangely, "How did you know?" "My teacher Einstein told me this. He was in London at the time. According to divination, he learned that the 2 poor children were killed in the Tower of London Gardens, and their bodies were built into the wall beside the stairs. Haha, Richard III is their uncle." At this time, Albert suddenly stood up and said, "Brother Marin, don't worry, I will never become a person like Richard III. Moreover, I will never get involved in military power, nor make friends with generals." Marin nodded approvingly. "Albert, I believe you. I did this to prevent trouble before it happens, not against you and Simon." "I understand," Albert said softly. After Albert said this, Adler and Simon couldn't sit still, and old Hoffman's face became very ugly. Adler stammered, "Marin, or, I will hand over the command of the army in Oldenburg and come back." "No, Adler, don't worry, the troops under your command are just militias, and they are stationed outside the homeland. As long as the number does not exceed 5,000, I will not have any other ideas. Moreover, you gave me my inheritance rights, and I will not treat you and your descendants unfairly." Adler sat back with peace of mind, and Simon didn't know what to say. He said carefully, "Brother Marin, It's okay, Simon. As long as you don't control the local army, there will be no problem. I don't mind attacking the natives of the savage continent. Brother Marin, what about me?" And was also frightened by Marin's performance just now, and asked a little scared. "Anne. Hee, what are you worried about? You will marry the prince in the future and become a happy girl. But you can't tell your future husband the secret of the richness of the savage continent. Otherwise, if he has the ambition to compete with me, I may kill him." Marin smiled and said something that frightened everyone. Woo, Brother Marin, please don't kill him, otherwise, I will become a widow." Anne was obviously frightened. "Don't worry, Anne, as long as you don't reveal this secret, there will be no danger, right?" Marin said gently. Although Anne stopped crying, she was also frightened. On the side, old Hoffman was angry. And Mrs. Mary looked at Marin with a complicated face. That expression was both unhappy and comforting. She knew that her son Marin was already a qualified and cold monarch. Marin saw that everyone seemed to be stunned, and wanted to ease the atmosphere, so he said, "Okay, my brothers and sisters, don't worry. As long as you don't take the initiative to hurt me, I won't hurt you. After all, we are brothers and sisters from the same mother. I, Marin, will not forget you even if I become rich. The more successful I am, the more benefits you will get. Today, I say these words to remind everyone. This also shows that I don't want to go to the point of opposing each other with my brothers." Everyone nodded and agreed with Marin's statement. However, the warm atmosphere could not be restored. For the first time, Marin's brothers and sisters realized that their most promising brother was not only their relative, but also a cruel monarch. Chapter 275, Instructing Albert. After selecting Albert as the new governor of the Twin Islands, Marin called Albert into his office, spread out a map, and began to give instructions on work. "Albert, look carefully, this is a twin island, the one on the right is Amerigo Island, and the one on the left is Columbus Island. After you go there, you have to go west and arrive here, Long Island, and then go west and enter the Hudson River. Well, this island in the river is called Manhattan Island. This area is called New York." Marin is so lazy that he doesn't even bother to change the name. "If possible, you can spend some beautiful glass products to buy this island. You can buy this island with a little glass products." Albert was puzzled. How could there be such a stupid person in the world? "Well, you don't understand. This area called New York, including a large area in the west, is controlled by a clan alliance called Delaware, or Delaware. This alliance is a clan alliance in a matriarchal society." "What is a matriarchal society?" Albert was puzzled. "It means that women are in charge." Albert was a little dumbfounded, this was beyond his cognition. Women like beautiful things, so I asked you to bring some beautiful glass ornaments to exchange for land with them. If it were a man, it wouldn't be so easy. How about I bring some floral fabrics? Albert asked. Fancy fabrics? Marin thought about it, and it seemed that East Frisia also had a weak wool textile industry. Although there were only a few wool textile mills, woolen fabrics could be woven. Of course, dyes were expensive and were all imported. Remembering that women were born to like bright things, Marin nodded and said, okay, you can try to bring some floral fabrics. After buying Manhattan Island, you can build a castle on it. Then, trade with the Indians regularly. Aren't we going to attack the Indians? Albert was puzzled. Stupid, do we have to fight? Moreover, even if we want to attack the Indians, we need a guide. Guide? Albert was a little puzzled. That is, local people who are familiar with the terrain. Remember, Albert, the wild continent is covered with dense jungles. If it is not necessary, do not easily send troops deep into the jungle. Those Indians are masters of jungle ambushes. Besides, the Delaware people I chose are the friendliest of the Indians. You can win them over through trade. You can even help them farm and then sell them some cattle. Usually, you should hire more Indians to help you do things. When you want to expand in the future, you can win over the Delaware warriors to help you deal with other tribes. With them as guides, you can easily find the opponent's village, and it is not easy to be ambushed in the forest. Albert thought for a long time and nodded. I understand, Brother Marin, is this what you meant by pull one faction and fight another? Oh, you are quite talented. Yes, that's what I mean. We will expand with the Delaware people. When our territory becomes larger and larger, the Delaware people will become more and more scattered. There are only a few thousand of them in total. Once they are scattered, there will be very few people in each place, and they will not pose a threat to us. Moreover, we can rely on them to rule the Indians. Brother is really smart. He is worthy of being a disciple of the immortal. Okay, stop flattering me. Remember, when trading with the Delaware people in New York, you must purchase a large amount of oak, especially whole oak. It will be used for shipbuilding in the future. There is a kind of red oak over there, and its leaves turn red in autumn. Tara's men will tell you after you get there. In addition to white oak, red oak is also needed. After the wood is purchased, build a shed on Manhattan Island to let it dry. After 1 or 2 years, it can be used for shipbuilding. Remember, this is one of your most important tasks after landing. Yes, I understand. One more thing, after landing, you should use more cattle and mules, and you are not allowed to bring horses ashore. The horses must be left on Amerigo Island and Columbus Island. Even if you really bring horses ashore, they must be castrated. In addition, you are absolutely not allowed to sell horses to Indians, only cattle and mules are allowed. Marin thought of the terrifying Indian cavalry in later generations, and decided to give Albert a shot in advance. Why? Albert was puzzled. The Indians are brave and good at fighting, but they don't have horses. If the Indians have horses and cavalry, what's the point of expanding? Just wait to be beaten. Albert thought about it, and it was true. The other side was good at jungle warfare, and with horses, it was simply amazing. So, Brother Marin, the Indians are so powerful, can we defeat them? Yes, as long as there are Delaware archers to cover the flanks, you organize strong soldiers to wear full sets of plate armor, you will not be afraid of the Indians' shabby bows and arrows. As long as you get close to the enemy can only wait to be hacked to death. It's really a good idea. There is a problem with this tactic, that is, the soldiers wearing plate armor consume too much physical energy. It is not convenient to run horses in the jungle, so only infantry can wear plate armor. Therefore, you need to select a group of very strong soldiers, like Kahn and Adler. Otherwise, ordinary soldiers will be exhausted after running for a while. But it is difficult to find a pervert like Kahn. I will look for it for you, but I guess I can't find many people. However, the number of Indians is also small. As long as there are dozens of plate armor infantry rushing forward, it will be enough to defeat them. Albert nodded, waiting for Marin to help him select dozens of animals to act as scouts. Facing the soft earthen bows and arrows of the Indians, it is obvious that the soldiers wearing plate armor are invincible. The only weakness of plate infantry is physical fitness. Therefore, this type of soldier needs abnormal people to serve. Try not to let horses go ashore, lest the Delaware people ask for them. If your officials really need mounts, use mules. Mules can also carry people and pull carts. I will send a large number of male donkeys and female horses to Columbus Island. You will establish a mule breeding base on Columbus Island to supply the needs of the mainland. If you really need horses to go ashore, remember, they must be castrated. Whoever brings an uncastrated horse to land will be arrested and imprisoned immediately and will not be pardoned. Understood, I will write it into the laws of the two islands. That would be the best. By the way, you can bring some sheep and domestic pigs over and raise them there. These can be sold to the Indians, and you can also teach them how to raise them. The reason why the Indians are so brave is that they often hunt during the slack season. If you teach them to raise pigs and sheep, they will usually go to herd sheep and have no time to hunt. The fierce temperament cultivated by hunting will also fade. Therefore, you can sell sheep to them without restrictions. However, you can't give them the British semi-fine wool sheep I have. They are good things and their wool is very valuable. Use ordinary sheep to sell to Indians. In addition, get some salt from the salt-making base on Cape Breton Island and sell it to the Indians. This is hard currency and can be used to hire Indians to help us cut down oak. Unlike glass ornaments, it is impossible to ship them in large quantities for a long time. After all, glass ornaments are a luxury to the Indians, and the Indians cannot buy them every day. Salt is different. It is needed every day. The North American Indians are backward in civilization and are not very good at making salt. Therefore, salt is definitely hard currency in North America. In this way, Marin called Albert into the office and gave him instructions for a long time, pointing out the direction of work for Albert after he went to the North American Twin Islands, so that Albert would not mess things up after he got there due to his lack of experience. Chapter 276, Determining the Governor, General. Albert's governor of the two islands was determined. Marin needed to write to Terra and tell him that he would be transferred to Cuba to serve as the governor of Havana. Of course, in addition to notifying him to go to Havana, Marin also planned to give Terra a little reward. Before, Terra had been conferred the title of hereditary knight. However, due to his limited ability, it was impossible for him to be conferred the title of baron. Therefore, Marin sent him to America as governor. However, the merits of reclamation in the two islands of North America were not enough to promote Terra from a hereditary knight to a baron. Therefore, Marin thought about it and decided to confer the title of hereditary knight on his second son, Hyzen, to reward him for his merits in reclamation in the two islands. Terra got married before going to America. As Marin's confidant, his marriage was not a problem. Although his wife was a commoner, Marin had previously conferred the title of Lady Knight on his wife in the name of Duke of Egypt. In addition to reclamation on Amerigo Island, Terra was busy making people. So, the second son was born, and the eldest son Jason was more than 2 years old. Moreover, it was very important to let Terra open up the Havana colony this time. Because the Havana colony is not only suitable for growing sugarcane and rice, but also cotton, sisal, cocoa, rubber trees, spices. It seems that everything can be grown. By the way, tropical fruits such as bananas, pineapples, coconuts, etc. can also be grown. Well, lemons can also be planted on a large scale, saving the need to go to Italy to pick lemon leaves. You know, lemon leaves are the secret treasure of Marin's great voyage. Dry and crush the lemon leaves, no one can recognize what they are, sprinkle some pepper in them, and I guarantee that even if you have a keen nose, you can't smell what they are. Then, soak the lemon leaves in hot water and drink them, which can fully resist scurvy. In addition, lemon fruit can actually be cut into slices and dried, and can be used to soak in water. Later, Marin saw slices of dried lemons in the supermarket, selling for 70 or 80 yuan per pound. Of course, Marin would never take out dried lemons for the sailors to drink. Because the appearance of dried lemons is too obvious. As long as you ask, anyone with a little knowledge can recognize that it is a lemon, and it cannot be kept secret. After the lemon leaves are crushed, it is difficult to tell what it is because pepper is added. Anyway, Marin said it is a strange herb, and the sailors can't figure it out. Even the two great navigators Columbus and Amerigo couldn't tell the difference between lemon leaves. The people who made the lemon leaves were a group of reliable serfs arranged by Kohler. However, those serfs were restricted to their own estates and did not know that these crushed lemon leaves would be sent to the fleet for the sailors to drink. Therefore, except for some core members such as Marin and Kohler, no one else knew what this medicine was. As for tropical fruits, Marin thought about it and it seemed that bananas and coconuts were both Asian products, not in Europe and the United States. Pineapples are from America, but they are probably still in the Amazon tropical jungle, waiting for people to discover them. Marin suddenly regretted it very much. If he had known earlier, he would have asked Amerigo to bring back some banana and coconut seedlings before he set off for India. After all, bananas and coconuts are native to Southeast Asia, and India has close contacts with Southeast Asia and has introduced bananas and coconuts long ago. Therefore, it is very convenient to introduce bananas and coconuts in India. Moreover, bananas and coconuts are also very good tropical fruit foods. Bananas are sliced and dried to become dried bananas, and coconuts are also. In later generations, the Pacific Island countries exported dried coconuts, which was an important source of foreign exchange. Of course, because Grenada has rice introduced from India, Cuba does not need to introduce bananas and coconuts. The main reason is that Marin is greedy and wants to eat. There are so many plains on the island of Cuba, and the climate is so good that so many crops can be grown. Therefore, the Havana colony is very important to Marin. Therefore, Marin said in a letter to Terra that if the Havana colony is well managed, a hereditary title of a baronet will not be lost. However, the Havana colony is different from the two island colonies. The Havana colony is surrounded by the Taino people's territory. If you want to expand there, you will inevitably have to fight with the indigenous people. Therefore, when Terra went there, he not only needed to build, but also needed to conquer those Taino tribes. Of course, the Taino tribe was relatively friendly, so Marin's instructions were to both attack and win over. That is, it was necessary to attack the Taino tribe. However, after conquering it, the original chieftain system was abolished and replaced with the European military rank system. Then, the friendly Taino people were raised as serfs, fed and clothed, but not allowed to hold weapons. The Indians lived a simple life and it was not easy to get food, so they developed a character that was good at hunting and fighting. If the gentle Taino people were raised in the manner, as long as they worked honestly and provided enough food, they would definitely live better than before. In this way, the Taino people, who were gentle by nature, were still easy to conquer. The only thing to be vigilant about was not to introduce smallpox into the Americas. Because these Indians had very low resistance to smallpox. A smallpox outbreak on Hispaniola in 1518 directly wiped out 90% of the Taino people on Hispaniola. Because of the lack of labor, the colonists had to introduce black slaves to Haiti. In the end, Haiti became a black country. The cost of introducing blacks is very high. If the Taino people cooperate with colonial rule, Marin plans to introduce cowpox to protect the Taino people on the island and prevent them from dying of smallpox. If they don't cooperate, forget it. The island of Cuba is so rich that even the old Americans coveted it at the end of the 19th century, and brazenly launched a war against Spain and seized Cuba. Therefore, Terra's task is very heavy. If the colonization goes smoothly, it is not excessive to reward him with a baron title. As for another colony, Moa, Marin needs another consideration. This consideration is to find professionals who know how to explore minerals to preside over the exploration of nickel and chromite there. As long as the nearby nickel and chromite can be found, Marin will have stainless steel that is very resistant to seawater corrosion in the future. Unlike tinplate, although it is also corrosion resistant, it will not work for a long time. So, Marin began to ask his men whether he could find a professional who was proficient in mining and smelting to preside over the mineral exploration in Moa. Coincidentally, Heidel, who had already gone to Oldenburg to serve as the prime minister, recommended his younger brother Wiltz to Marin after hearing that Marin was looking for talents in mineral exploration. Wiltz is 30 years old and is a prospecting engineer and smelting engineer. At present, he is in Austria, exploring metal mines for a large miner in the northern foothills of the Alps. Although he is only 30 years old, Wiltz already has 12 years of work experience. Among them, he has been the chief prospector for 5 or 6 years. He has been responsible for the exploration of silver, copper, lead, tin and iron mines. He is a very experienced prospector. Most importantly, Wiltz's cultural level is also very high. He almost got into the University of Cologne like his brother. But in this era, the admission threshold for civilians at the University of Cologne was very high, and the number of admissions was too small. Therefore, Wiltz failed to attend the University of Cologne. Later, because of his interest and hobbies, he went to study prospecting. Today, he is already a well-known prospecting engineer in Austria, and has done some research on metal smelting. He has professional skills and is very educated. He is obviously the person Marin is looking for. Moreover, he is the younger brother of Hayter, Marin's confidant. So, the position of governor of Wiltzmoa was also determined. After hearing this, Hayter immediately wrote to his brother, asking him to come back to work for Marin. You know, if you become the governor of Marin, you can't escape a title. The Hayter family is a civilian family. Although he became the prime minister, he was only the lowest baron, and he couldn't bless his brother to become a noble. Therefore, if you want your brother to become a noble, going to Moa to help Marin prospect for minerals is obviously a shortcut. If things are done well, a knight will not escape. It may even be a hereditary knight. In that case, even the identity of future generations is guaranteed. As long as you are not a fool, you will not refuse. After the governors of Havana and Moa were determined, the only thing left was the governor of Panama. There are too many poisonous insects in Panama. It is very dangerous to live there before wormwood and pyrethrum grow up. Even with mosquito-repellent floral water, there are certain risks. So, the question of who to send as governor arises. Marin told his men frankly about the risks of going to Panama, and his ministers suddenly lost their enthusiasm. If it were an ordinary place, maybe someone would take the initiative. For example, Cuba Moa is not so dangerous, and Hayter took the initiative to recommend his younger brother. But when it comes to the dangerous Panama, those ministers suddenly dared not recommend their brothers and relatives. Because it is too dangerous. At this time, suddenly one of Marin's guards stood up and knelt on one knee in front of Marin. "My lord Duke, let me go, I am not afraid of poisonous insects." Marin recognized that the guard was called Gorad, only 19 years old, from a knight family, from the country of Mark. However, this young man is thin and only 1.73 meters tall. Among Marin's group of guards, he is a dwarf. However, this little guy is quite smart. In fact, Goulard was also very clear that because of his weak body and lack of strength, his martial arts were at the bottom among the guards. Therefore, he usually read a lot of books and planned to use wisdom to make up for his physical deficiencies. However, as a guard, he could only be promoted if he made a breakthrough in martial arts. Therefore, he found that it was difficult for him to stand out. Coincidentally, this Panama pioneering made Goulard feel that the opportunity had come. The ministers were unwilling to go, or did not want their relatives to take risks. That was because those ministers were already very rich and did not need themselves or their families to take risks. But he was different. Goulard was just a small guard who was difficult to stand out. If he did not seize every opportunity, he might not be able to stand out in his life. Therefore, when no one was willing to stand up, Goulard decisively came out and volunteered. Marin tested Goulard in person and found that his cultural level was good. Unlike other guards, who were all muscular men, he was somewhat similar to his own characteristics, better at thinking. So Marin agreed to Goulard's request and appointed him as the governor of Panama. Of course, in the following time, Marin needs to give individual tutoring to Wiltz and Goulard to teach them how to be a governor. In addition, Goulard also needs to fight in Panama. After all, there are Indians in Panama, and they don't seem to be as gentle as the Taino. Therefore, if you want to occupy the territory, you will inevitably have to fight with those indigenous people. Goulard is from a knight family, so he is very suitable to lead troops to conquer those Panamanian Indians. However, in this way, both Terra and Goulard will have to bring a group of warriors to facilitate the conquest of those indigenous people. Even Wiltz needs a guard. Although there are few plains in the Moa area, there may not be many Indians living there. However, for safety reasons, Wiltz also needs a guard to accompany him to protect his safety. Marin thought about it and decided to recruit 2,000 mercenaries to protect the three governors and conquer the local indigenous people under their command. Among them, Terra and Goulard each brought 800 soldiers. And Wiltz brought 400 people to protect his prospecting. Chapter 277 still needs to buy unpaid labor. Since we have soldiers, we must bring serfs. Otherwise, without anyone to provide food, these soldiers will starve to death. Therefore, Marin equipped Terra and Wiltz with 300 farmers each. Moreover, the 800 mercenaries under Terra and Wiltz are actually rural youths, and they can do farm work and help during the busy farming season. However, Marin hesitated about sending farmers to Panama. Because Panama is really not a good place. Soldiers can hide in the fortress to avoid going out to contact those poisonous insects. But serfs are different. They need to reclaim wasteland and farm in the dense forest. However, sending those serfs to Panama, which has not yet been reclaimed, is no different from sending them to death. What should I do? Marin rubbed his swollen head and went to the next room to ask the maid to help make a pot of Earl Grey milk tea. Because of the headache, Marin did not plan to go back to the office for the time being, but planned to watch the maid make tea for fun. As a result, the maid was panicked by Marin's look and thought that Marin was interested in her. The maid was a little panicked because of Marin's gaze, and she forgot her usual skill in making tea. She was seen frantically finding cane sugar, milk, and a black tea brick. Usually, breaking a tea brick is a very easy thing. But under Marin's gaze, the maid panicked and made a mistake. She originally planned to break a small piece, but she used too much strength and broke off half a tea brick directly. Moreover, the half-broken tea brick fell directly into the pot of boiling tea. Woo woo. Duke, I didn't mean it. The maid was trembling with fear. However, Marin was not a cruel nobleman and chose to forgive her. However, there should be some small punishments, otherwise they will not remember. For example, the maid was fined 3 days' salary. Looking at the half-black tea brick in the pot, Marin felt very sorry. That was the amount of 4 or 5 times of boiling. Moreover, tea bricks are so expensive, much more expensive than the maid's 3-day salary. However, half a tea brick has been soaked in milk, and it would be a pity not to throw it away. So, Marin told the maid to get more milk and cane sugar, and change a big pot to prepare a big pot of milk tea. Looking at the black tea bricks rolling in the milk, Marin felt very interesting, black and white. Black and white, black. Suddenly, the shadows of white people and black people appeared in Marin's mind. Yes, I can buy black slaves. Marin patted his head and said. Panama is indeed dangerous. Since you are reluctant to let the German farmers take risks, why not buy some black slaves? You know, black people are much more adaptable to the tropical rainforest climate than white people. After all, the hometowns of black people are mostly tropical rainforest climates. Transporting black people from the tropical rainforests of Africa to the tropical rainforests of America is basically equivalent to transporting the British from the British Isles to the Irish Isles. The possibility of not adapting is very low. Moreover, to say a cruel word, even if the black slaves died, Marin would not feel sorry. Before, Marin originally planned to let Gollard lead troops to enslave the local Indians in Panama. However, thinking of the aggressive character of most Indians. If they are angered, they may have to fight. After all, the Indians in Panama, such as the Chaco people, had a glorious record of repelling Spanish colonists several times in the 17th century. You know, although Spain in the 17th century began to decline, it was still the empire on which the sun never sets, and there were Spanish phalanxes that crisscrossed Europe. The fact that the Spaniards could be repelled several times proves that the Chaco people's fighting power is still very strong. Therefore, it was not a good idea for Marin to send troops to enslave the Panamanian Indians. You know, that was a jungle war in the tropical rainforest. Marin's army had no experience in that area. Buying black slaves is different. Although black people are erratic and aggressive, they are normal black people. Black slaves are different. They are abnormal black people. Because normal black slaves with a spirit of resistance have long been killed. Those left are all black people who are willing to submit. Therefore, the first generation of black slaves are often very honest. Because the dishonest ones have been killed by the slave catchers. These honest black slaves, under the supervision of the slave owners, often work honestly and don't do anything weird. However, it's hard to say about the descendants of the first generation of black slaves. After all, a dragon gives birth to 9 sons, each with its own uniqueness. It's normal for the first generation of black slaves to give birth to black people with a volatile temperament. Therefore, the American blacks that Marin saw in later generations were all the kind of thorns who tilted their heads and did things with others. Especially the big blacks in the NBA, who would PK with others if they didn't agree. Therefore, Marin actually agreed with the Arabs' choice to castrate the black slaves when they sold black slaves. Why? This way, there will be no offspring who are volatile. Moreover, it also avoids the problem of racial discrimination and racial segregation. In the future there will be no blacks, so there will naturally be no social problem. Marin thinks that the old Americans in later generations are also brain dead. Since they are unhappy with blacks and can't enslave them, why don't they immigrate all blacks to Liberia as they did after the Civil War? Of course, as a Chinese in the future, Marin is still very happy to see black people occupy the United States, and he hopes that the United States will become the second South Africa. However, if he really takes the initiative to ask the slave traders to castrate the slaves, Marin feels that he will definitely be described as a big devil in the history books. So Marin gave up this idea. Because he only plans to introduce a small number of black slaves to develop the dangerous Panama, and does not intend to promote black slaves throughout the Americas. Especially in North America, we must never leave a root of trouble for our descendants. Marin's principle is that in North America, it is better to introduce Indian untouchables as serfs instead of introducing black slaves. Because the Indian untouchables are much more honest than black people. Moreover, they are good at farm work. Why can Britain control India for hundreds of years in later generations? Isn't it because the 3 brothers are more honest? Especially the untouchable brothers, don't be too honest. The most popular people in India are those turbaned Asans. These turbaned Asans are the original ruling class of India. Naturally, they are unwilling to lose their ruling power, so Lao Gao resisted. For example, the Queen of Jhansi was a woman wearing a turban. However, most of the Indians are civilians of the middle and lower castes who believe in Hinduism. These people are willing to obey and do not like to resist. Therefore, the British rule in India is so stable. It was not until the Second World War that Britain was crippled and modern ideas were widely spread that India gained independence. In addition, Marin had another idea for buying slaves. He wanted to scare the Portuguese. The specific method was to first buy a ship of slaves from Portugal to reclaim land and cut trees in Panama. But after a while, he would go to Portuguese merchants to buy slaves. Moreover, he told the Portuguese merchants that all the slaves on the last ship had died in the tropical jungles of the wild continent. Therefore, it is urgently needed to be replenished. At the same time, the person in charge of buying black slaves has to describe a terrible scene to the Portuguese slave traders. In the hot and humid tropical rainforest of the savage continent, miasma is rampant, and poisonous insects and snakes are everywhere. The first batch of black slaves did not die because of miasma, but were bitten by poisonous insects or snakes. After a while, they will go to the Portuguese to buy black slaves again, and the reason is that the last batch died again. In this way, the news will sooner or later reach the Portuguese royal family. After that, the Portuguese will learn the information that the savage continent is very dangerous. When renegotiating the Treaty of Tordesillas with Spain, they will not be willing to covet America. Because Columbus intervened in the Indian trade, Portugal is now focused on the Indian trade route. Therefore, there was no fleet sent to Brazil in 1500 as in the original history. Therefore, the Portuguese still don't know what America is like. Marin threatened them like this, and they still dare to go. At that time, the Portuguese will definitely choose to protect their interests in Africa. Chapter 278 British troops land in Ireland. After a long period of preparation, King Henry VII of England finally gathered 20,000 troops, including 7,000 longbowmen, and began to transport them to the island of Ireland with the help of merchant ships of the Five Ports Alliance. The landing site of the British Army coincided with that of Earl Edward, and they also chose the small town of Arklow, 21 kilometers south of Wicklow. After all, the British were not stupid. They knew that if they landed near Dublin, if they were discovered by Edward's army, they would probably be attacked by Edward's army during the landing process. If the army did not land, it would have no chance of winning if it encountered the army of Earl Edward. Because after the army landed, it needed to reorganize and form a battle formation to be considered combat ready. Otherwise, it would be a mess. Therefore, the British considered again and chose to land in the seaside town of Arklow. This is also to avoid being attacked during the landing process. In fact, it was no problem for the British Army to choose to land in Wicklow at this time. Because Earl Edward did not station a large army in Wicklow at all, but only left 1,000 local militias. Earl Edward didn't know whether these militias would surrender directly after the British siege. Of course, he didn't care. Because he put all his energy into the defense of Dublin. When the British landed, the speed was very slow. Because, unlike Edward, they did not use local small fishing boats for waiting landing, but stupidly used the only few long bridge docks. The troop transport ships were waiting in line on the sea, landing one by one. If Earl Edward's army was nearby at this time, they would definitely wipe out the British troops who landed in the early stage with a smile. Because the efficiency of the British landing was too slow. The final result was that Edward's 8,000 troops landed in half a day. And 20,000 British troops took 6 days. When 20,000 British troops landed on land tiredly, many people were exhausted. It was enough to be so tired for a landing. The British Army did not bring civilians, but sent troops to recruit them directly in the local area. However, the British ships brought enough food and other supplies. Therefore, as long as the British Army caught enough Irish civilians on the shore, they could move them. In this way, the British Army began to send troops to capture civilians around Arklow to help transport supplies. By the way, they also robbed the civilians' homes. These Irish farmers were unlucky. Not only were they captured as civilians, but the food and valuables in their homes were also robbed by these British soldiers. Moreover, there was no salary for being a civilian for the British Army. So, the Irish civilians, with a lot of resentment, began their careers serving the British Army. In addition to the 20,000 troops, the merchant ships of the Five Ports Alliance were also filled with food, weapons and supplies. In order to attack the city, the British Army also raised 30 bronze cannons. Because the British also got the method of breaking the city by bombardment plus blasting the door from the Danes. However, they didn't know that Earl Edward had replaced the gate of Dublin with a large iron gate with the help of Marin, and it was also coated with a layer of tin. The tin was purchased from Cornwall, England. The British Army dragged on and finally went north. Along the way, 20,000 British troops marched while looting local Irish families, plundering food and property, which aroused great anger among the Irish. However, in front of the 20,000 British troops, the Irish had no good way. When the 20,000 British troops arrived at Wicklow, the longbow soldiers only shot a few rounds of arrows at the top of the city, and the 1,000 Irish militiamen in the city surrendered. Because these Irish militiamen had no armor on their bodies, facing the rain of arrows from the sky, many people were injured. As a result, the morale of the Irish militia plummeted. In the absence of any hope, the militia leader simply opened the city and surrendered. Seeing that his side had only shot a few rounds of arrows, the other side opened the city and surrendered, and for a time, the morale of the British army was greatly boosted. Many British soldiers began to fantasize about conquering Dublin in the same way. Under the leadership of Commander-in-Chief Sir Richard Pole, the British soldiers entered the city of Wicklow with a high attitude and rested for 3 days. During these 3 days, the whole of Wicklow became a living hell. The British soldiers began to burn, kill, loot, and murder women in Wicklow, turning the capital of the Kingdom of Leinster into a living hell. Although there were some Wicklow citizens who resisted, the number of British troops was too large. Therefore, the rebels were shot into hedgehogs by the British longbowmen. The British army was wandering around the whole city of Wicklow, but the Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, Sir Richard Pole, a confidant of King Henry VII of England, was having a headache. Because before setting off, Henry VII and his wife gave him 2 opposite instructions. King Henry VII of England told Richard Pole to kill Earl Edward on the spot if he caught him, so as to eliminate future troubles. And his wife Margaret asked him to let Earl Edward escape if he defeated him. Even if Earl Edward did not escape, it would be best to capture him alive and bring him back to England. This is not the most important thing. If it was just like this, Sir Richard Pole would stand on the side of King Henry VII of England without hesitation and kill his brother-in-law. However, Princess Margaret gave him an ultimatum. The ultimatum made him shudder. Princess Margaret threatened Richard Pole like this: "If you kill my brother, I will publicly declare that I am the legitimate British throne and the legitimate heir of the York family. My son, Henry Pole, is the legitimate King of England of the York family." Richard Pole was overwhelmed. Princess Margaret was his wife, and her son was naturally his son. If Princess Margaret declared that little Henry was the legitimate King of England, Richard Pole would definitely not let little Henry go based on his understanding of his boss. So, he is so entangled now. It can be said that Princess Margaret, this crazy woman, is threatening him with the future of her son. If he kills her brother, then little Henry will also be finished. In fact, Richard Pole is just overthinking. He hasn't taken Dublin yet, but he is thinking about whether to let Earl Edward go. However, at this time, there are many people in the British Army who have similar ideas to Richard Pole. Because the victory in Wicklow made them go to their heads. The British soldiers did not know that Earl Edward had never intended to defend Wicklow. Therefore, the defenders of Wicklow were all farmers recruited by Earl Edward from the surrounding areas of Wicklow. They were not regular soldiers at all. So, after several rounds of arrow rain, these farmers chose to surrender. It was different in Dublin, where all the soldiers were professional soldiers. Facing the rain of arrows from the British army, they would not surrender so easily. Moreover, Earl Edward had long received the intelligence sent by Marin as the North Sea Chamber of Commerce, and learned that the British army had mobilized all 7,000 longbow soldiers to rush to the Irish battlefield, and had already taken countermeasures. Chapter 279 The French army conquers the fortress of Calais. The information that the British army officially sent troops and landed in Ireland soon spread to France and Scotland. Although King James IV of Scotland was the son-in-law of Henry VII, he did not hesitate to send troops southward and took an offensive posture at Hadrian's Wall, the dividing line between England and Scotland, to threaten England. Although Henry VII's eldest daughter, Queen Margaret of Scotland, was very dissatisfied, James IV knew very well that England was definitely Scotland's mortal enemy. If England was allowed to become endlessly powerful, Scotland would inevitably be unified by England. Moreover, Scotland had been unified by England before. This time, the British transferred all their main forces to the island of Ireland, and James IV felt that the opportunity was rare. If the British army withdrew its troops in time, then, he would pretend that nothing had happened and withdraw his troops. But if the British continued to attack Edward, then he also planned to really invade England, at least to plunder Newcastle and other major cities in northern England. As for France, countermeasures were also quickly taken. Originally, Louis XII planned to send a fleet to the mouth of the Thames to threaten London. However, French ministers believed that the French fleet was too weak. If they failed to block London and were instead pinned to the ground by the British fleet, it would be a loss. At this time, Jean-Paul, a French officer who happened to be returning from Ireland on leave, stood up and proposed that while the main force of the British army was going to Ireland, they should send troops to capture the last foothold of Britain on the European continent, the Calais fortress. Jean-Paul's suggestion was appreciated by King Louis XII of France. So, Jean-Paul, who was just a knight, was summoned by the King of France. "See my king." Jean-Paul knelt on one knee to perform the knight's salute. After all, he was meeting the king. So, he used the highest etiquette to pay homage. "Get up and tell me why you suggest attacking Calais." "Your Majesty, I followed the army of Edward, Earl of Warwick, and participated in the battle to capture the Irish fortress of Wicklow. I learned a new method of siege. With this method, it will not be a problem to capture the Calais fortress, and it only takes 1 or 2 days." Louis XII was startled, and then seemed to remember something. Could it be the same method that the Spanish used to break through the city of Naples? Exactly. This method is actually very simple. It was invented by Marin Hoffman, Count of East Frisia in the Holy Roman Empire. At the beginning, he used this method to quickly sweep across the Danish Duchy of Holstein and the Duchy of Schleswig and captured more than a dozen cities. Each siege took no more than 3 days. When I was fighting in Ireland, I heard that the Dutch North Sea Chamber of Commerce invited a Danish soldier to demonstrate this simple, crude but effective way of siege. Under the bombardment of 20 heavy artillery provided by the North Sea Chamber of Commerce, a hole soon appeared in the west gate of Wicklow. Then, the Danish soldier, carrying a door panel and a gunpowder barrel on his back, ran into the city gate. Wait, what is the Danish soldier doing carrying a door panel? Louis XII did not know much about this tactic, so he asked this question. To prevent attacks from the top of the city, just hold the door panel on your head. Unless the enemy uses a big stone or a heavy iron ball, they can break the door panel's defense and hurt the person hit by the gunpowder barrel. Otherwise, ordinary bows and arrows can't reach the person under the door panel at all. I see, it's really a good idea. Then, the demolition team arrived in front of the city gate, stuffed the gunpowder barrel into the hole in the city gate, and tried to bury the gunpowder barrel a little deeper. In this way, it is said that the door will be more powerful. Then, the demolition team lit the fuse and quickly fled the scene holding the door panel. Soon, the city gate was blown up. Well, this method is really powerful. If the enemy uses it to attack French cities, it will be very fierce. I wonder if there is a way to crack it. Yes, it is said that if the city gate is replaced with a big iron gate, it can withstand the impact of the iron ball shells. As long as there is no hole in the city gate, there is no place to bury the gunpowder barrel, and the city gate cannot be blown up. This was told to him by a Danish soldier named Jonathan. Of course, it is also true. Then the gates of Calais fortress have been replaced with iron gates, so there is no other way, right? No, the British don't seem to take this seriously. Moreover, I sent my servants to Calais fortress on horseback and found at the gates there have not been replaced with iron gates. That's why I dare to make this suggestion. That's great. I'm going to send troops to capture Calais fortress and drive the British into the sea completely. Your Majesty is wise. This time, the British have no time and no troops to reinforce Calais fortress. By then, the British will have no foothold and will not pose a threat to France. Soon, King Louis XVI of France mobilized 10,000 troops to the Calais fortress. With the powerful national strength of France, it was much faster than the British to mobilize. Moreover, because there was a way to make a quick decision, King Louis XVI of France did not need to prepare so much food and grass. The only thing that needed to be prepared was probably enough gunpowder and shells. After all, bombarding the city gates requires a lot of gunpowder and shells. France has no shortage of artillery. Although they are all small-caliber artillery, hundreds of them are enough. In this way, 10,000 French troops, with 100 artillery pieces, quickly marched from Paris to the Calais fortress. At this time, there were only 3,000 defenders in the Calais fortress. Under normal circumstances, with these 3,000 defenders, even facing 10,000 enemy troops, they can hold out for several months. What's more, the Calais fortress is on the north side of the sea, and the British can continuously launch support from the sea. Therefore, under normal circumstances, even if 20,000 French troops come, they may not be able to defeat it. However, the current situation is very abnormal. Because the main force of the British army has gone to the island of Ireland. At this time, there are only a few thousand defenders in London in the British mainland. Moreover, these thousands of people in London must not be moved. If they move, once they fail, then London will be an empty city. Therefore, at this time, there was no reinforcement to be dispatched to the Calais fortress. When the French army arrived, although the Calais fortress sent out a clipper for help, distant water could not save the nearby fire. In just 2 days, the French used hundreds of small cannons to smash a hole in the south gate of the Calais fortress. Then, Jean-Paul commanded a strong subordinate to hold the door panel and carry a gunpowder barrel to blow up the gate of the Calais fortress. Suddenly, the French army rushed in and used their superiority in manpower to engage in extremely brutal street fighting with the British army. Although the elite of the British army was stationed in the Calais fortress, many of the troops sent by France were warriors from the Knight family, with strong personal martial arts, and they had an advantage in street fighting. When both sides used cold weapons, France, which had more knights with strong martial arts, won the street fighting, drove the British army, which had only a few hundred people left, into the sea, and successfully occupied the last foothold of the British army on the European continent, the Calais fortress. Chapter 280, Saltpeter is still short. When the news of the French attack on the Calais fortress came, King Henry VII of England panicked. However, thinking of the solidity of the Calais fortress, Henry VII did not lose hope. Then, he sent his men to various places, trying to mobilize thousands more people to transport them to the Calais fortress by sea to help resist the French attack. However, what was unexpected was that a few days later, Henry VII learned that there were only a few hundred British troops left, and they fled Calais on the ships at the dock. And the Calais fortress naturally fell into the hands of the French. Upon hearing the news, Henry VII spit out a mouthful of old blood on the spot, and then fainted gloriously. After waking up, Henry VII hurriedly ordered the ministers, "Quick, quick! Order the navy to immediately enter a state of full combat readiness. If you see the French fleet, be sure to sink it." "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" Navy Minister Johnson was a little puzzled. "The French have already mastered the method of easily breaking through the Oak Gate. Now London is empty, and the Oak Gate is there. If the French army is allowed to cross the sea and land and surround London, Britain will be destroyed." Johnson thought about it, and it was really the case. So he suggested, "How about we withdraw the troops in Ireland?" "No, no. This is a great opportunity to destroy Edward, and we can't afford to lose it. Although the French army is strong, the premise is that the French fleet must be able to defeat the British fleet and control the English Channel. Otherwise, they can't get through. That's why I asked the British fleet to be fully prepared for war. As long as our fleet can control the Channel, the French can't get through." Henry VII said firmly. "Your Majesty is wise." After saying that, Johnson quickly mobilized warships to guard the English Channel. Then, "Your Majesty, what about the invasion of Scotland?" Henry VII's stepfather Thomas Stanley asked worriedly. After discovering that Henry VII showed no signs of withdrawing his troops, the 10,000-strong Scottish army had broken through Hadrian's Wall and began to plunder some towns in northern England, heading straight for Newcastle. Scottish army. Henry VII frowned. After a long time, he sighed and said, "Let him go. There are also guards in the north of England, and Newcastle also has 1,500 defenders. I hope they can hold on." "Then don't care." "Care? What can I do? The main force of the army has gone to Ireland. I finally caught Edward, how can I allow him to run away? As long as Edward dies, my throne will be safe. As for the Scottish army, it will not be able to reach London for a while. Don't forget that there are so many counties in England, and each county has an army. Before Scotland came one city after another, the war in Ireland had already ended. A few days ago, Richard wrote a letter saying that they had arrived near Dublin and were ready to attack the city. I don't know if they succeeded. What if the Scottish army reaches London? Don't be afraid. The Scottish army has only 10,000 soldiers. Even if they fight to London, they will consume a lot of soldiers. When they reach London, it will be good to have 8,000 people left. There are also 4,000 to 5,000 soldiers in London, all regular troops, and they can resist it completely. When Richard's army comes back, it's just right to destroy the Scottish army, and then go north to annex Scotland." Henry VII said fiercely. "What if Scotland also uses artillery to bombard the city gate? We may not be able to hold on until the reinforcements return home. I will send people to Sussex to collect iron materials and melt a few iron doors to replace the oak doors. Sussex is the iron smelting center of England. There are many blacksmith shops here, and there is no shortage of iron materials. It is no problem to collect iron materials here and make dozens of large iron doors." In fact, Marin was also struggling at this time. Intelligence from the British side was being sent to him continuously. At this time, Marin suddenly realized that there was an opportunity to destroy Britain. What opportunity? That is, Marin could send a fleet to destroy the British fleet. As long as the British fleet is destroyed, the French army can cross the sea safely, then surround London and destroy Britain. At least, it is not a problem to kill Henry VII. At present, Britain has only about 120 warships in total, most of which are merchant ships of the Five Ports Alliance. Moreover, they are all classical cog sailing ships with thinner sides. The side of such ships cannot withstand the attack of the artillery of Marin's warships. Now, there are more than 23 warships under Marin's command. Before, there were 8 warships plus 15 250 class armed merchant ships. But as time went on, the number of 250 class armed merchant ships has increased to 25, and the number of warships has increased to 10. In other words, Marin now has 35 warships. Of course, even with 35 warships, Marin's navy can't shake. Why? There are enough ships and guns, but not enough gunpowder. Because of the large number and large caliber of artillery in naval battles, the consumption of gunpowder is also amazing. The salvo of 20 18-pound guns on a battleship consumed 120 pounds of gunpowder on the spot. In naval battles, the guns fired an average of 1 round every 2 minutes. If you fire continuously for 30 rounds within an hour, the consumption of gunpowder is 3,600 pounds. If you fight for a day, okay, let's fire for 5 hours, that's 18,000 pounds, equivalent to 8.16 tons of gunpowder. 10 battleships will consume 81.6 tons of gunpowder. And the 25 armed merchant ships, the number of guns is halved, but they also consume dozens of tons of gunpowder. In other words, after a naval battle, the consumption of gunpowder is hundreds of tons. Damn, Marin felt again there is not enough gunpowder. Or to be more precise, there is not enough saltpeter. I am afraid that only by developing the saltpeter mines in Chile can the naval warships be allowed to fire at will. So, Marin paid more attention to the development of Panama. As long as you gain a foothold in Panama, you can go north to Mexico, south to the Inca Empire in Peru, or go to the northern desert of Chile to dig saltpeter. However, the northern desert of Chile is too dry, and it has not rained for hundreds of years. Perhaps, only such a climate can preserve the saltpeter that is easily soluble in water. Otherwise, the saltpeter would have been dissolved by rainwater and seeped into the ground. It is true that Marin wants to mine saltpeter, but who can adapt to the desert climate? By the way, Arabs and Berbers in North Africa seem to be quite adapted to such a climate. Their homes are also dry deserts. Maybe, we can go to Morocco to get some Berber slaves and take camels to the northern desert of Chile to mine saltpeter. Marin fell into deep thought. Marin remembered that in a certain novel, it was mentioned that Arabs were used to dig saltpeter in the northern desert of Chile. The novel said that there was too much saltpeter in the Chilean desert, and the value was amazing. Therefore, it needs to be kept secret. Otherwise, if people knew that there were hundreds of millions of tons of saltpeter picked up on the ground, it would probably be robbed by groups. Therefore, the idea of that great man was to let the Chinese manage the Arabs to mine saltpeter in Chile. In this way, it would not be easy to leak secrets. Marin quickly wrote down this method. Although it was not necessary to use the Chinese, it was necessary to use the most loyal subordinates. As for mining saltpeter in the desert, Arabs or Berbers could do it. In addition to saltpeter, Chile also has many copper and silver mines. It seems that there are silver mines near Santiago, the capital of Chile. Of course, when it comes to silver, who can compare with Peru and Mexico? For Marin, the most needed thing is Chile's saltpeter. Possessing Chile's saltpeter is equivalent to having the ability to fire unlimitedly,